Here we are with another episode of Data Bytes, all the data information you need as a non-data science business runner. I'm here with Matt D'Amato out of Boston, co-founder of ClauseSafe AI. Matt's going to talk to us about frameworks versus enforcement. What do you got on that one, Matt?
Well, I mean, first off, right now, there's so many frameworks, right? And so a framework, let's break down the two of them first, right? So frameworks are what your company adopts to essentially it's guidance for how you're going to govern your AI system internally, right? So that is the first part. That's what a framework is itself. Now, there are so many of them. And now how do you find the right one, right? So there's no right or wrong answer for that. It's really internally, what are your uses and your use cases for AI, and find which framework aligns best with your vision or compliance. Now, the governance side of things, those are things like the EU AI Act, the NIST from the United States, ISO. Those are the compliance side of things. So now the difference, of course, frameworks are what you're going to adopt internally. Compliance is what you're legally, you have to stay within the guidelines of. Now, there are so many frameworks right now. The EU AI Act while it would be considered a framework, it's a governance policy, right? There are fines associated with it. And that's where the line draws, right? So why the certification closes the gap though, right? So there's a gap there. Frameworks, you can adopt them internally, govern your internal AI systems, but proving that's where the issue comes, right? So you can tell everybody we adopted this framework, XYZ framework. We've implemented it throughout our company, and we're compliant. Now you go to show that to insurance regulator or a court, and they're not going to accept that. So even if it looks great on paper, it's not acceptable by standards of law, and you could be fined if you still violated it. And you also need someone in charge, right? You need a human in the loop that is accountable for anything that actually goes wrong and for implementing that framework throughout your company. Now, as far as compliance goes, that's why
Let me stop you for 1 second, just to make sure everyone understands when you say framework. When I think framework, I'm thinking when it comes to agentic systems or AI systems, a framework is what it has access to and what actions it can take, what data it can leverage, what permissions it has, and again, like what it can do. Right? That's what you mean by a framework.
Those would be internal guardrails. Those would be internal guardrails and boundaries that you set up from within the system. Framework itself would be how you're going to govern it internally. So how your company is set to deal with compliance issues, to deal with data processing and handling. That's what a framework is. So when your company chooses to adopt a framework, I'm going to use my own, for example, right? Our Clause 5 framework. So while we don't yet have it available, we're hoping next year to release it under open source licensing agreement. However, if someone were to adopt our Clause 5 framework, now that's great. It handles a lot of things like data processing, what you're going to, as far as the guardrails you implement throughout the company, safety. That's the framework. It's human aligned values, who's in charge, the human in the loop, the accountability, who's the buck stopped with, right? Or if your company gets sued, who's the one in charge that was in charge of processing and dealing with where the AI system was being dealt with. So who was handling those interactions, who was overseeing them? That's the person that's going to be accountable. That's the difference between a framework and guardrails. Guardrails are just what you set up, permissions where you're going to allow it to go, things like that. That's the difference between the two.
Also called scaffolding, right? So for agents, that's more or less scaffolding. Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. So we'll come back and talk about, we just talked about frameworks. We'll come back and talk about enforcement.